Okay, so we're currently live. So Cara, you kind of popped in the middle of the conversation, but I was telling Tati and Nicole that my friends and I had a PowerPoint party yesterday, where the goal was everyone gets to create a 10 to 15 minute PowerPoint presentation on any topic of your choosing. So I did the very proper and definitive ranking of all of Jane Austen's novels.
Of course.
And it was my ranking, and my opinions are never wrong.
Not at all.
I had a friend who did the entire taxonomy of the dragons in Dungeons and Dragons. So they did it like they had things like morphology and like sort of those animal family trees, like genus and species and stuff. It was like a lot of fun.
That sounds amazing. Like,
oh, I just heard my voice. It was fantastic. I loved it. Hence why, so my friend did the comparison of the two Charlie and the Chocolate Factory movies, and there was a small rant about Grandpa Joe, and I'm always down for that because I hate Grandpa Joe in both versions.
He's kind of the worst, and I don't realize it until I'm an adult. Like,
right.
Like, yeah.
You're watching and you're like, what's going on here?
Yeah, like they're living off of cabbage soup and he pretends to be sick until he finds out he can go to a chocolate factory.
And then he's like, I'm better now. Especially in like the newer Tim Burton one, he actually like dances a jig. I'm like, seriously?
In the 1971 version, it's worse because he does a song and dance number.
It's just like everyone just like, no one's going to talk about that? Okay.
No one's angry about this because I know I am.
Yeah.
Also, in the 1971 version, Charlie is feeding Grandpa Joe's cigarette habit. Like, Charlie took on a paper route to pay for Grandpa Joe's cigarettes. And I'm like, this man can do it. I have a big, like, he takes up way too much of my time.
I understand.
Also, I'm wearing my vintage dress today, so.
That was so cute.
It was, I know. I looked at the website as soon as you posted that. I'm like, these are so cute.
And, like, the quality is really good. My, like, one complaint, and it's not their fault, it's just mine, like, I need a little more chest room, and so these buttons are hanging on by a thread, so I'm trying to make sure I don't, like, flash the audience. That would be the right way here.
That would be an exciting way to close Austen Anonymous. Like,
a little scandal.
Yeah.
That's how I get more subscribers.
That's the secret. Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny.
am still trying to figure out what I have done every single time to pull up the chat, and for some reason I just can't do it right now. Why am I doing
like that?
Yeah. I'll figure it out later. We're good.
So I'm going to take a sip and then we can get started.
I always just have YouTube like in a separate little window over to the side. Because if you're not hosting the StreamYard, you can't really chat from StreamYard. So if I'm not hosting, I just have YouTube off to the side here.
Yeah, and that's what I usually do too. And for some reason, I'm not able to, like, I don't have the exact like angle or dimensions of the window for it to like overlap correctly.
Properly.
So this is clearly on me. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. We can get started with introductions.
Okay.
So, hi everyone, it's Taylor, and this is our final Austen Anon live show, which I am very excited and also very sad about. So we are going to be discussing Jane Austen's final book, Persuasion, which was published in, and I keep checking this, and I feel like every page I go to flips back and forth between 1817 and 1818, which, okay, one of those years.
One of them's.
Well, yeah. So I am very excited to have Tati, the Tiny Booktuber, and Nicole from Who Picked This Book here to help Cara and I discuss this. So would one of you like to introduce yourselves and talk about your sort of experience with Jane Austen? So whoever wants to go first.
Take it away, Tati.
Okay. Well, hi, I'm Tati. My channel is Tati the Tiny Booktuber. And I was never a huge fan of Jane Austen until I started watching modern adaptations like Clueless or the Lizzie Bennet Diaries, which I love. And then I could kind of understand what was happening in the classics. And now, thanks to the Austen Anonymous read-along, I have read and enjoyed many Jane Austen's works.
Hey, that's awesome.
So yes, I am Nicole from Who Picked This Book, and I think, like everybody, Jane Austen was required reading in high school, at least in my AP English class. So of course we read Pride and Prejudice, which I think in high school, if we just had required reading, I just didn't like it. I was like, no, I don't want to read this. So, and then it wasn't until I watched the 2005 version with Keira Knightley that I was just like, wait, this is what's going on? Because I wasn't aware. So I immediately, reread it and, loved it. I've reread it, Pride and Prejudice, probably like 7 times throughout, since I've, seen that. And then when I was watching The Lake House with Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves, Persuasion is actually Sandra Bullock's character's favorite book. And so in the movie, she reads off a quote, and I was just like, oh my God, that's so beautiful. So I went to read Persuasion, and I'm like, oh my gosh. The longing, the angst, it's real.
Cara, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Cara. My channel is Wild Book Garden, and as anybody who has seen more than one of these live shows knows, I have grown up living and breathing Jane Austen because my mom is a huge fan, and that was something that me and her and my sister always did together. So I have a lot of personal memories associated with her work, but it's something where as I've gotten older and come to appreciate them on their own merits, I feel like I've just loved her more and more as time goes on. I appreciate new and different things every time I read them. And yeah, Persuasion is probably one of the last ones I read, because for a long time I was just stuck in this loop of obsessively rereading Pride and Prejudice.
Yes. Yeah.
And I was like, I'll get to her other books eventually, but in the meantime, Pride and Prejudice was where it was at. But yeah, I watched the adaptations a lot, and it wasn't until later that I actually went back and read the source material for all of them. And yeah, it's I feel like I just love and appreciate Jane Austen more and more every time, especially because I think there are some parts of her books, and Persuasion I think especially, where there are certain things in them that I appreciate more as I get older. And I love that. I love that there's something new and exciting about her books, even after reading them so many times. So yeah, big Jane Austen fan over here.
Awesome. And I wanted to apologize ahead of time. There's a huge thunderstorm going on, so you might hear some rumbling, and you might see me looking fondly towards the window. It happens. So I'm Taylor. My channel is Page Screen Taylor because you're on it. And I talk about books from almost every genre, though right now my channel is surviving strictly on live shows alone. And like I mentioned in previous Austen and on live shows, my experience with Jane Austen starts with Sense and Sensibility. I saw the movie way back when, and it had 90% of the cast of 90% of the cast was from Harry Potter, so I got invested. And so I watched it and I was like, oh man, this slaps. And so I read the book, and from there I moved on to Pride and Prejudice, and so on and so forth. And Persuasion is not just my favorite Jane Austen book, it's the best book ever created. And if anyone disagrees, they're wrong.
They're wrong.
And with that, why don't we move on to overall thoughts on the book? Does anyone want to go first?
This is my second favorite Jane Austen novel, honestly. It's, Pride and Prejudice will always have a special place in my heart, but Persuasion is it's my second favorite. It's so good. And I find every time I reread it, I think this was my 3rd or 4th time rereading it, I get something more out of it, kind of like what Cara was saying. There's just, whether you know, you're in a different headspace or where you're at emotionally, some things just hit you differently. And like, not to jump ahead, but that letter at the end just hits me the same. Like, every single time. I just love it so much. But yeah, I feel like when I first read it, it didn't resonate with me as much, just because I feel like when Wentworth was first introduced, it was kind of like very quick, and it's almost like if you blink, you miss it kind of thing, and you're just like, wait. So I was so rereading it, I just make sure that I'm like super focused on, you know, when, you know, they come into effect. But gosh, I think, you know, this is, you know, probably like the first, you know, second chance romance and like slow burn and angst, and I'm just, I love it so much.
Tati, would you like to go?
Sure. I agree with a lot of what Nicole said. Persuasion is definitely now on my favorite Jane Austen's, one of my favorite Jane Austen's. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. The second chance love story aspect of it.
Yeah, I love Persuasion. I think it's tied for my favorite Jane Austen. And as I think I said in my Goodreads review, I pretty much like what Taylor was saying. I was like, this is a flawless novel, and I am not accepting criticism at this time.
No, I won't hear it.
I love this book so much, and I think it's a very cathartic book to read, because like Anne deserves so much, and
she deserves.
To see her get it is just like it's lovely. And it's funny because I'm not really a fan of second chance romance, like in general, but it's done so well here. And I feel like this is just an example of like Jane Austen is one of those authors who could sell me on anything. Like, I don't care if it's my least favorite trope. Jane Austen can write it in a way that just steals my heart. And yes. I love that.
I agree with you, Cara. Like I said, Persuasion is just my favorite book ever. And Elliot is like me to the point where sometimes it's scary, but it makes it really easy for me to self-insert when I read it. And I'm usually not a fan of second chance romance, but there's something about the way this is written that makes me just love Anne and Wentworth together, and the fact that it's both one of her most mature novel, and the fact that the relationship, I feel, is based on a foundation of maturity. Mm-hmm. Is something I really like about the book, which we can get into as we go on. So I wanted to move into characters, which is usually just my next on my list. So why don't we talk about Anne Elliot?
I really love Anne. She's like, in the beginning, she's very quiet. She's very demure. She almost, is, I wouldn't say okay, but she almost lets like everybody kind of run ramshot over her. But then, as the story progresses and Wentworth, does value her opinion, does value her thoughts, and actually asks her, like, not even like when she talks, he just listens, but he actively asks her for her opinion, unlike the rest of her family. But she begins to value herself more and like see her worth, and just not just sit there and, kind of take the, abuse that, her family gives her. And I just really love that kind of growth that she has over the span of the novel. She comes into her own by the end, and she's, taking charge almost, especially when, Louisa had her accident, and, she was the one that, everyone was looking to, and she's like, we can't do this without Anne. I'm just like, yes.
Yeah. 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 I love Anne as a main character. It reminded me a little bit of my changing feelings rereading Mansfield Park for this live show. Like, I was surprised at how much spunk Anne had, like, because I agree. I think she does kind of just go with the flow a lot of times. She sort of sees it as like she's just doing the most she can for like the sake of like family harmony and everything. But she will stick up for herself if she thinks she's doing the right thing. Like when they're in Bath and her family wants her to break her appointment with her friend who's like lower class. Like, I love Mrs. Smith, by the way. They like want her to basically ditch her for this wealthy cousin that nobody cares about. And she refuses. Like, she flat out is like, I am not going, and you can go if you want to, but I'm not changing my mind. And I thought that was really cool. Like, there are several moments throughout the book that I feel like show that, yeah, Anne does have this like iron will that's kind of hidden under all these layers of like politeness, and she's a very kind person, but she's not like, it's almost like at the beginning of the book, I'm swayed a little bit by Wentworth's opinion of her, because I think of her as somebody who's very persuadable, and like she just kind of goes along with like whatever somebody she respects tells her to do. But I realized pretty early on that it's like, that's not the case. Like, yes, she made this one decision based on another person, but I think that experience like caused her to really look at what she actually wanted, and it like caused her to listen to her own how do you say it, like her own like moral compass, I think, a lot more. So I loved Anne.
Yeah, I really like her. I like sort of the growth, because, you know, obviously at 19 you're a lot different than how you are at 27. You know, I'm not 27 yet, and I'm still way different than I was at 19. And like looking back at how I was at 19, I probably would have made the same decision Anne did.
Yeah.
So it's like nice to see her become her own person by the end and become like more of an adult. But I don't know, I love these little moments of her standing up for herself, and it's always like not always just for her own gratification, but like with Miss Smith, she made the appointment, she made, you know, plans, and she wasn't going to break those plans. So I love her so much, and sometimes it's hard for me to put into words, just and
she deserves every happiness.
She really does.
She so does.
Yeah, I loved her character, and I found her very relatable. And I loved your comparison with her and with Mansfield Park, those two main characters, and kind of seeing how there's more to them than being just kind of yielding or passive.
Yeah, I love that Jane Austen gives like the shy girls their happy endings. Like, I love that. As an introvert, I love that.
And I will say, because, you know, as we move on, we're going to get into Anne and Wentworth's relationship. But one of the things I love is that as she sort of grows a little bit more of like a spine and becomes more confident, like it shows outwardly. And I do love that Wentworth finds it very sexy.
Yes.
Yeah. So, speaking of Captain Wentworth, would we like to discuss him? Let's talk about Freddie.
I feel like every time I think of him, I just like, I don't, like, he could just say the right thing no matter what the situation is. He always knows the right thing to say. And it's just so swoony and so romantic. I was just like, he's on another level. I mean, come on. Jane Austen can write a hero. Let's just say that, you know?
Yeah, first of all, and we're going to talk about the letter, but the letter, that's a standard. I also love that he finds confidence attractive. I also like that, I feel like he's very underrated as an Austen hero, and part of that is that I think he's very subtle. You know, he's not as sort of infuriating as Darcy can be, and he doesn't lecture Anne like Mr. Knightley does, but there's like, he still has a presence that I think is like good. And I do like that he and Anne, even though they've been apart, they know each other so well. And I like that he looks out for her and also looks to her in a time of crisis. And I also do like that he's a little bit salty about everything, because I don't blame him.
Yeah, I was also really impressed with how ambiguous their interactions were at the beginning. Like I could see how Anne wouldn't be sure if he still cared about her, you know? Like, obviously we know that he still loves her, but like the interactions they have, I'm like, I can see how this would be interpreted in completely opposite ways, like depending on the person or depending on, I mean, like obviously Anne is assuming at the beginning that he doesn't care about her anymore. And I was just very impressed with how, I guess, believable, like, or plausible it felt. Like, as the book went on, I think it became clearer that he did still have some kind of feelings for her. But yeah, those interactions they have at the beginning where he's kind of like ignoring her, and you're like, is this because he does still love her, or because he just doesn't care about her at all anymore?
And I think that's where like Anne's anxiety for the beginning of the book comes in as well, because, you know, she's very anxious about, you know, potentially seeing him again. And when it finally does happen, it was kind of just like a passing glance. They probably said, you know, a couple like pleasantries, and then she was like, and my dogs are barking, sorry. But so she was just like, oh, like, he doesn't love me anymore. But she's still holding on to all these like emotions. And, you know, from the first couple of instances where they're back together or interacting with each other, you know, it kind of like, it almost seems like he's giving her the cold shoulder because of, you know, what had happened, you know, in the beginning. So, but I'm right there with you, Cara. It's like, sometimes it's like, does he still love her? I'm just like, show something. Where, you know, but...
So Morris said, and I agree, that letter makes me bite my fist every time.
Yes. I just think of that Leonardo DiCaprio like gif where it's like
yeah.
Yes. Honestly, like when I was reading it, I was like reading it like this, and my husband's like heavy breathing, and my husband's like, are you okay? I'm like, yes, it's the letter, it's fine. I was like, oh my gosh, like, I gotta fan myself.
It never gets old.
Oh my gosh, I could sometimes I just pick up the book and just read that letter, honestly, whenever I just need a little like pick me up, you know, like, not all men are terrible.
Yeah, we stand a man who can write like that, and we also stand a man who loves confident women.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, Tati, do you have, like, what are your thoughts on Wentworth?
Well, one of my favorite parts of his character is, I think, the courage it would take to reapproach Anne after she's the one who rejected him in the first place. I love that aspect of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
For
and,
sure.
like, I do kind of like the sort of drop a letter and run away tactic.
Yes.
There's something so endearing to me about him having like so many feelings that he physically cannot exist in the same room as she reads them. I'm like,
Yes.
This is so relatable. This is like every stressful conversation I have ever had. It's like, I'd love to just like write a letter and like book it.
Yeah.
I do love the image of him dropping the letter and like not even just walking out of the house, just booking it down the street.
Just running.
And when he comes back to tell her to read it, he like doesn't even tell her. He just like pushes it close to her, and he like.
Anne's like, yeah, that was the letter you were writing. Yeah,
And I do like in the
pick
letter,
up on
and
him,
one point he's like, I can't write, and I'm like, I love.
Oh.
What an absolute disaster! I love him.
Well, honestly, it's almost like he was feeling like, I'll just write it in a letter instead of telling her, because if she doesn't feel the same way, I won't have to stand her rejection a second time, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So he's like, I will just, you know, drop this off. If she doesn't come to me, then that's it. That I don't have to worry about it. I know, and I won't have to like stand being in the same room with her as she like tells me no a second time. Because I honestly think like he just loves her so much, it would have like just physically broke him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love like the whole scene that happens in, like that whole conversation between Anne and Captain Harville, and where she's saying, like, she's arguing like on behalf of women, where she's like, I think that we're more likely to love when there's no hope. And it's a very like romantic like conversation anyway, like her point of view. And then it's like he's listening and he drops his pen because he's like so invested in it, and they like look at him and he's like
he's like, don't mind me, I'm just writing over here, sorry.
Writing this totally not romantic business letter that has nothing to do with this conversation. Like,
But he was like, honestly, I feel like that conversation that she was having just gave him hope. Like maybe she does, feel the same way. And he was just like, I can't let this moment pass up. I can't.
Yeah, like that was all like off the cuff. He's like,
yes.
I just have to get all my feelings in this one letter. Like
before they're done talking.
Yes.
I could just see him like over the desk. Like.
One of the other things that I do really like about the letter, and it really speaks to Jane Austen, is that the letter does sound like a sort of stream of consciousness rambling letter. Like, it's very well written and romantic, but it doesn't sound like he sat down and was like, in this paragraph, I will talk about this, and this paragraph, it's just one long, like, oh God.
Yeah, he has no idea what he's doing.
He writes one thing, and then he thinks of something else. He's like, oh, I got to put that down. And something else will come in, like, oh, I got to put that down. Yeah, for sure.
Do we have anything else we want to say about Captain Wentworth? Because if not, we can move on to William Elliot.
William Elliot.
Like the energy, and instantly he's like,
you're like, such a high, and then William Elliot.
I'm ready. Let's rip him to pieces.
Yeah. Oh,
what are our thoughts on William Elliot?
Honestly, he's looking out for number one. Honestly, he doesn't care like who he has to like almost betray or take advantage of, as long as he gets title, money, whatever. I wish I was in that thunderstorm with you, Taylor. Because it's honestly like 115 degrees here in Phoenix, and I'm like so weltering. But yeah, and honestly, like that whole conversation between Anne and Mrs. Smith, where she's trying to tell her about William Elliot, and she was like, oh well, if you've heard it from so many people, it kind of loses the truth. And I'm just like, Anne, stop interrupting and listen. Like, because she's trying to tell you what's up. Like, stop. Yeah. Trying to give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm like, no. she's trying to tell you.
Yeah. I will say, if I had to pick any flaw in this book, it would be that William Elliot is both really boring and like I could see through him. I was like, this boy is slimy. Yeah. He is opportunistic. I don't like reading about him. So let's get back to Wentworth. Let's go. Yeah. That's like my one complaint with the book, is that I just do not care about William Elliot.
He's like a necessary evil for the plot to happen. But
yeah.
Yeah. I was struck by like when I was reading I think it was the part where they were first like getting to know him, and he was like hanging on them constantly at Bath and everything. And I just stopped and I'm like, has there ever been a Jane Austen man that was introduced as being like this charming and like everyone loves him and everything, who was not a scumbag? Like, I don't think so. Jane Austen was super suspicious of charming guys, and I find that very interesting. She's like, run the other way. Like, don't
trust them. She's like, I'm trying to teach you something, ladies. Whenever someone comes off as very like oozing that charisma and charming, it's a snake in the grass, and you better run. Yeah.
She's like, get out of there. This is a red flag. Like,
oh yeah. She's like the first author to put like, recognize these red flags, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I know. I picture Jane just like looking out for us. She's like, "Don't be fooled, girls." Like,
don't do it.
Oh my god!
Oh my god!
That was scary. Like, I felt that one.
Oh my god!
That was so loud.
Yeah, and the lightning just caved through. Ooh. Sorry about that.
Wow. Are you doing okay, Taylor? Like.
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm like right by the window so I can hear it, but that one was a wild one.
Yeah.
Honestly, knock on wood that your internet is still cooperating. Yeah. Like, knock on wood, where's the wall?
Yes. William Elliot is trash, and he didn't actually get much of a comeuppance, other than I think he's getting sued at the end, or at least he's like, the whole will thing with Mrs. Smith is getting settled.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I it's one of the things where I felt like if Jane Austen had removed William Elliot and just devoted another chapter to Anne and Wentworth,
I would have been okay. It would have been.
Yeah, I would have been fine.
Why do we need stories with conflict? Like, let's just
honestly, like, there could just be a whole book of just like them like having dinner, or them having like discussions, or just like them like in their happily ever after just talking. I would so read that. No conflict, just them living their life. I'm like, oh, yes.
Time to write Persuasion fan fiction.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yes, that'd be amazing. I find like there's a lot of like Pride and Prejudice, like not necessarily retellings, but like what happened afterward, you know, like Mr. Darcy's Diary, or Mr. Darcy Takes a Wife, or, you know, like those books. And it's just basically them living their happily ever after. I don't really see a lot for Persuasion and Anne and Wentworth. It should happen. Yeah,
I agree. Do we have anything else that we'd like to say about William Elliot?
Tati, what did you think?
Everything you guys said, I totally do. And I didn't pay much attention to him because Anne is so in love with Wentworth, right? You know? So yeah. I never saw him as like an option for her.
Right. He was just unnecessary.
He was
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No. I was just saying, like, he's just taking up, you know, like just taking up space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like, we'd have these long paragraphs that were describing him just like talking about nothing. Or like
that's the thing.
Yeah.
I would like when I was listening to the like audiobook, William Elliot would start talking and I'm like, well, time to take a nap.
Yeah.
Like, is important.
I just use that little like 15-second forward option. Like, and we're gonna go through this.
So we have other characters we want to talk about, but what I think is interesting about Persuasion is that with like, I think every other Jane Austen novel, there's like a good amount of characters to talk about, but with Persuasion, it's so focused on Anne and Wentworth. There aren't a lot, but we do have other characters that we can definitely discuss. Lady Russell, Sir Walter Elliot, Elizabeth Elliot. Actually, Sir Walter Elliot was in this book a lot less than I remembered the first time. I don't know why in my head I thought he was in it more.
Because he's so annoying. He like dominates the book.
Honestly, like just that first page and like him just talking about, you know, how his favorite book is like in the Baronage, like his like family tree or whatever, and he just took great pride into putting like his dates in there and everything. I was just like, and then there was that whole, it was like almost like feel like a whole page where he's just talking about how like wonderful he looks, and he takes like the way he looks like very seriously, and that's how he judges a lot of other people, is physically how they look. And that one scene where he was like, I stood on a corner and watched 87 women go by and not one of them were attractive. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
You have literally nothing else to do besides look at how attractive people are. I mean, come on.
Get a job.
Maybe then you wouldn't be in debt. I don't know.
Call me crazy.
I was like, oh God, he's like so. I don't like no. Another character that I was just like, get out of here. Where's like, more Wentworth?
One thing I noticed about like the characters overall is like I tend to think of Pride and Prejudice as being like the one that has the most commentary on the class system, and I think it does have a lot. But with Persuasion, I really noticed it this time around how like basically all of the upper class characters are utterly ridiculous, and like we're not supposed to like them, whereas a lot of the like lower class characters like Mrs. Smith and the Harvilles and like even Admiral and Mrs. Croft, like a little bit, all the ones that would have been considered like beneath the Elliots, all of them are like some of the best characters in the book, and like you're supposed to love them, and they're just like such great people. And I just thought that was really interesting how like almost every single character in this book, I feel like it's like if you were lower class, you were probably a good guy. If you were upper class, you were probably a bad guy. The only exception I can really think of is Mrs. Clay, because she was like scheming to like marry Sir Walter or whatever, which like why would you want to? But okay. So anyway, that was just something I noticed is like it was very, just very interesting to see how, like, I think Austen was very clearly showing, like, hey, just because you have a lot of money or like you have a title or whatever, it does not make you a good person at all.
Yeah.
100%.
I would also like to point out that Sir Walter has barely a title. He's a baronet, which is like nothing.
Oh gosh.
I think that's like the funniest part is that he's not even that like high on the nobility chain, but he acts like it's like the best thing anyone could accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could also talk about the Musgroves, Captain Benwick, who I actually really liked. Mrs. Smith, who was great. So I don't know if there are any other characters you'd like to discuss, or...
Well, one thing that I noticed, I don't know why I didn't notice it before, but like more so like reading it, you know, this time just like really, you know, trying to get, I like annotated it so I have like notes and stuff to make sure I have all the stuff, but like how like annoying Mary was.
Yeah.
Like honestly, like if it wasn't about her, she would like, you know, almost like fake an illness, so like Anne would come over and sit with her and talk with her, and I'm just like, and even like that scene with like Louisa, where everyone's just like, oh, Anne should stay with her, Anne should watch out for her, and then Mary's like, no, like they don't even like each other, like why is Anne going to be the one to stay here? I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Or when it's like not about her, she doesn't want anything to do with it.
Yeah, or like when her son got injured and she's like, why are you all going to the party without me? Like, she's like, Anne should stay with him. She's not a mom, so she doesn't love him as much as I do. It'd be too hard on me. And I'm like, okay, Mary.
Even Anne was just like, well, typically moms want to stay with their sick children. You know, she was kind of like slyly putting that, like throwing that shade almost like, shouldn't you want to stay with your kid? Wouldn't you be worried? And she was like, oh no, it's because I love him so much. I can't stand being here. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. She's not even good at lying. Yeah, I had forgotten how annoying she was. Yeah. Sorry, was someone going to say something?
Oh, I was just going to say, like, one thing, I don't remember if I noticed this before or not, but like I'm a little annoyed at how everyone treated the engagement between Captain Benwick and Louisa. It was Louisa, right? I don't know why I always mix them up. I was a little annoyed about that because everyone was basically like, oh, she's so stupid. Like, what's she going to do? Learn to read a book? And I'm like, it just, I don't know. It didn't seem like when we see Henrietta and Louisa, it's like, okay, obviously they're not as like bookish as Anne, but they're not like illiterate. Like, it was very weird to me. I was like, I actually think it's kind of sweet that like Lisa and Benwick, like he was like reading poetry to her while she got better. And, like I think that's like kind of romantic, and I don't know. I feel like they could be happy together. Like they might balance each other out nicely, and everybody's like, "What's she gonna do? Read a book?"
Yeah, I actually really like Louisa and Captain Benwick together, especially because they mentioned that her injury like sort of calmed her down and made her like really scared. You know, it affected her, and they said something like Captain Benwick was always like by her side, whispering assurances to her and like making sure she was comfortable. And I'm like, they sound like a good pairing. Like, I don't know why everyone hated it so much.
Yeah, especially because like it's not like they had spent all this time establishing that like Henrietta and Louisa like hated books or like poetry or something. It's like I don't know. It's like just because they didn't talk about them all the time, it doesn't mean, I don't know, that like she wouldn't enjoy them. I don't know. Like there were a lot of jokes made about like, oh, he's going to read poetry to her.
I think it was just because it was just his personality where he like his idea of a good time was just sitting and reading, and that's like so obviously not like Louisa. She would want to be out and at, you know, parties and things like that, which, you know, that's what, you know, women did, you know, back in the day. They went to parties like because like it was so like it was hard set for them to like find a good match, and you had to do that at parties, you know. So but it was just like they were so almost opposite in that regard. But I really liked it because it was almost like a forced proximity trope that I really love in romance, and I was like, I would have liked that scene of like just like her like convalescing and then just him reading poetry to her and like taking care of her, and I'm like, so sweet.
I know. I was like, I would have liked to have seen some of that. I think that would have been very romantic.
Yeah, I would have loved it.
I would read their spin-off book.
Yeah, exactly.
A petition to bring Jane Austen back from the dead just so she can write the spin-off.
Right.
Write us the fan service we deserve, Jane.
We can go back to sleep after, but first. So were there any other side characters that we wanted to discuss? Or should we move on to like Anne and Captain Wentworth's relationship?
I love the Crofts. That's all I want to say is like,
yes,
they
I really like
are marriage goals, and I love that.
Yeah, I actually really like that Mrs. Croft is like kind of a badass, like going on ships and like you look over the contract for the home. Like she was like very active in like asking questions about like the property and the cost and all of this stuff.
Yeah, and like that scene where like Captain Wentworth is kind of being, he's like, oh, well, it's not that I don't like women. I just don't think we can make a ship like comfortable for them. And she's like, that's bullshit. Like she just goes off. And like those lines where she's like none of us want to be in calm waters all our lives. Like, I won't have you saying that we're fine ladies instead of rational creatures. Like, I'm just reading that scene. I'm like, Jane Austen has had it. She is like, enough with this sexism and nonsense. Like,
she was like, this is my last novel. I'm just going to pour it all out. I'm like, I'm going to tell you what I think about these men and their and what they think like women should be like home waiting for the husbands. And, you know, but yeah, she was like, there was that one part where, you know, they were surprised that she was the one asking about the property and not the husband. It was, and, you know, and she was talking about how, where all over the world that she sailed, you know, and she was like, and she spent like so many, you know, weeks or months or however long, like on the water. And I was just like, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. Actually, speaking about Mrs. Croft and the sort of feminism thing, I will also say there's a lot of like feminist, it's not even undertones, it's like overtones for the book. Like, I remember when I first read Persuasion in college, I like annotated during the conversation where she's talking to Captain Harville, and she talked the whole like man forgets or woman forgets sooner than man or something, and she was like, but you have jobs, we have nothing but to sit down and think.
Yes.
And I really liked that she sort of called them out on like their BS. I think I wrote in the margins feminist queen.
Yeah. Honestly, I feel like, especially in this book, but like Jane Austen writes like more feminist, you know, characters than some modern books. Like,
I agree.
Back in the 1800s, like she was ahead of her time. She was like, "This ain't it. This ain't it."
Let women have careers.
You know, and I love that she like lured people in. She's like, this is a great romance. And then she like slaps you with the social commentary, and I freaking love it.
And so like that like bit about Mrs. Croft like sailing and, you know, we women don't want to be in calm waters all our days or something.
Yeah.
And then the whole conversation Anne had with Captain Harville, it's just right there, and I loved it.
Blatant.
I was like, I just see like women like when this like came out or like reading it, and you know they're, you know, reading some of the scenes of how men are with women, and then like she's just snapping back, and then some women reading this be like, you know what, she's right, like all like causing all kinds of ruckus in the house, and the men are like, you can't read this book.
And I love it too, because like books like this show that it's not like women suddenly woke up one day and they're like, sexism is a thing. It's like like even before we had the word like feminist, or like there was like these organized like movements throughout history. It's like women noticed, like we're not stupid. It's not like nobody knew they were being mistreated or anything. And I feel like this book is a great example of that, is like, like even in the 1800s, they were like, this is not right.
Right.
Yeah. So why don't we talk about Anne and Wentworth's relationship, because it is the biggest part of the book. It's why I love the book so much. And I do think it is probably the softest and most tender romance of all of Jane Austen's books. Yeah. But that's my opinion. What do you three think?
I agree with you. It just, just comparing to other relationships that you see in Austen books, of course, with Darcy and Elizabeth, it's kind of like that hate to love kind of thing. And, there's this kind of, animosity between them at first, but between Anne and Wentworth is just so different. And like you said, soft, it's the angst, it's the longing, it's, the groveling at the end. You're like, please, like, don't tell me I'm too late, kind of thing. It's like that I love. And it's a different, more, also almost more subtle as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. One of the things I really like, and it's not a little detail, but it's something that I think can be overlooked, is that Anne and Wentworth know each other so well that they can look at the other and know what they're thinking. Like, a lot of times when Anne is looking at Wentworth having a conversation, she's like, oh, I know what's going on in your head because I know you so well. Or the fact that Wentworth sometimes knows that, like, when they're all walking and Anne has the opportunity to get into the carriage, or someone has the opportunity to get into the carriage, he knows that Anne's not going to say anything. And he's like, well, I'm going to do this for her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or like they're having like a conversation about like something else. And I don't remember. I think at this point he might have been thinking that she was involved with Mr. Elliot. So maybe he like wasn't even thinking he had a chance yet. Mm-hmm. But she says something about a party and she's like, oh yeah, like I've never, like it's a card party, so I don't care. And he's like, oh, you never liked cards. And I'm like, he remembers everything about her. It's like,
yeah.
That's really like just amazing.
I did love that it had.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. I love that it had both the aspects of them knowing so much about each other and then learning about each other now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I really love about it.
Yeah.
It's like they knew each other so well from just, when she was 19, they were only together for a few months. And that just kind of, just said like how well that they know each other. And then it's just years and they don't see each other and they're almost different people. She's grown and he's, well on his way and being important in his career. And it's like, Tati was saying, like they know each other, like their little like idiosyncrasies, but they're also relearning like the newer aspects of their personalities and who they are. And it's just beautiful.
Yeah. And also going back to what Tati said about like we have that previous relationship and then they're almost like getting to know each other again. I think that's one of the reasons why I love their relationship so much, despite the fact that I don't normally care for second chance romance, is because like, even though like theme wise, I think this is a book about second chances and that's one of the reasons I love it. I think with the romance, it almost feels like at the beginning, we're told what happens with them very briefly. Yeah. So we know that they were engaged or almost engaged. We know that Anne broke it off because of Lady Russell. And like, that's it. Like that, we don't really get those little details about what, like the things that they knew about each other or like even like scenes of them spending time together. We don't get any of that until later when it's sort of like rekindling it. So it almost feels like we're seeing their relationship develop for the first time because we didn't have any of that background. Like we get that as we go. And I love that.
Yeah. That's like also a really good point. And I know I said this earlier, but I do love that their romance is just built on a foundation of maturity. Like they're both older and wiser. They know themselves more. And it's also built on a foundation of, I guess, confidence. And what I love is that like Wentworth and Anne don't always move forward in their relationship until Anne starts getting a better sense of herself. And that's something I really love about the book.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else we'd like to say about their relationship? I know we talked about it a lot, but the next one is the letter, so we can also look at that. We talked a lot about the letter, but I think there's some stuff that we might also want to touch on. So I don't know if any of you have anything else to say about their relationship or the letter.
I don't know which of you guys it was who mentioned that it's like a very stream of consciousness letter. But that was something that I also noticed this time. And it makes it like even more romantic to me is like, he's not like sitting down to lay out like here are my feelings, and I'm gonna like compose myself. He's like, I am desperate. Like, I just need I am spitting like all of my emotions onto this one piece of paper because this is my last chance. And like, I really love that. Yeah, it's like Anne and Wentworth have a very mature relationship, but there's still like so much romance there. And I love that. Like, you don't have to have like, the fact that they're very mature doesn't mean that they can't have these like intensely romantic moments. And I really like that.
Yeah, I like that. I love that too. Something else I love about the letter is that it also symbolizes Anne's growth. In the beginning, the book refers to her as only Anne. That's all anyone sees her as, really, only Anne. And then by the end, she's grown to someone who pierces his soul. Like, that change in both herself and her own self-confidence and how other people see her is just so nice. That someone finally sees like her for more than only Anne.
Yeah.
Yeah, we go from in the beginning of just, from her father's point of view, just saying how, like you said, like she's only Anne, she's nothing really remarkable. And then how we're ending the book with that letter and just how Wentworth sees her. And it's just like, someone who appreciates her. Yeah. Like, honestly, like the way like her dad is like describing her in the beginning, I was just like, you're kind of a jerk. Like, and by kind of, I mean a lot. Like, it's like she's really not that remarkable in the looks department, so she really can't have anything else. Like, what? Like, there's nothing else like special about her. If she doesn't have the looks, she ain't it. Like, what? So that's why like he doesn't listen to her, like doesn't like take her opinions, especially when like the debt scene came out and it was Lady Russell who was actually like getting Anne's opinions on how they could get out of the debt. Like, he wouldn't even hear of it. He was like, oh no, like, I'm sorry, you want me to do what? Like, you want me to belittle myself? And he was like, I'd rather not have this house than kind of do that, what she was saying. And it's like, she really had like some valuable like opinions. And even Lady Russell was like, if they follow these, they'll get out of debt in like 7 years. And her dad's like, nope, I ain't doing it.
Yeah.
Awful. So stressful.
It is. Like, it's literally just about how he is seen, like how like he portrays himself to society that, Anne's like, okay, whatever.
I want to mention a comment we just got. So Hannah said, Hannah said also at the beginning, wait, I just lost it. She's described as plain, but by the end, so many people keep saying she's beautiful. And it's kind of like it shows that she's becoming more confident and growing into herself. And I really love that. I love the fact that it's not Wentworth paying attention to her that makes that happen. It's like Anne independently starts like thinking like, oh, people don't treat me very well and I don't like that. I'm gonna I deserve to stand up for myself. And it's almost like imperceptible. Like, there's no moment where she's like, that's it, I'm not gonna take this anymore. But we just see her throughout the book like becoming more comfortable, like sticking up for herself and everything. And I just love that happens long before she thinks she has a chance with Wentworth, or like long before he starts even like paying attention to her again. So I really like that it wasn't like he shows up and she's like, suddenly I'm beautiful because the man is back.
Yeah. That's like honestly such a good direction to take the book. She doesn't become beautiful or confident because a man pays attention to her.
Right.
It's all through her own self-growth.
Yeah, which like Nicole, as you mentioned earlier, that's something that modern novelists don't always get right.
Yep.
Right. Like, dang. But you can tell like from the beginning of the book how she's described, like she's definitely internalizing all that abuse, and it just shows in her pallor, in her she lost some weight, and it's just as she's kind of coming into her own and realizing like, I do have something to say and it's important. And that's when she's kind of like, she's described as looking better, quote unquote. It's when she doesn't take that abuse anymore and says, you're like, you know what, I have something important to say and you're going to listen. And that's how she just kind of takes, the rest of the book and like just not internalizing that abuse. And it actually just makes her look healthier.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if there were any other topics that we wanted to discuss. I feel like we covered everything that I wrote down. I did want to include this fact that I thought, well, two facts that I thought were interesting. One is genuinely very interesting. The other one is an English major fact, and I like it. So the genuinely interesting fact was that Jane Austen died before she could even name the book. So her brother chose the name for the book when it was being sent to the publisher. But it's widely believed, because the name she used for the book was just the Elliots, so it's believed that that would have been the title of the book. I personally think Persuasion is a better title.
Yeah.
I think it speaks a lot more to the themes and general feel of it.
Mm-hmm.
The other one, which is just the nerdy former English major one, is that Jane Austen is one of the founders, and she definitely perfected it in this book, of a style of third-person POV called free indirect discourse, which is like a combination of first and third person. And it's just a lot of fun to see it used so effectively here. So I'm trying to find like a good explanation of free indirect like discourse, but it's also one of those things that like it's hard to describe other than like just first and third person had a baby, and that's what it
Yeah.
If anyone else can describe it better than I can, please do.
I love that you mentioned that, because we talked about that in my class when we were discussing these books. And that also makes me feel better that you also don't know how to explain it, because like I could not figure out how to explain it. Like there would be moments where I'm like, all right, I get it, but I could not explain this to another human being. Like I don't.
Yeah. Like reading it, like I know what it is. I'm like, okay, this is free indirect discourse. So let's see. So free indirect speech. It's the example used on Wikipedia is he laid down his bundle and thought of his misfortune and just what pleasure he had found since he came into this world. It's like a combination, and it's hard to do it without writing, but a combination of the character's inner thoughts, but also what is happening within the world of the story. What is happening in like the diegesis. So that's how I can explain it. If you want to know more, I would really recommend Googling it, because it's easier to figure out what it is when you see it written on a page.
Yeah. The only other way, the way I always kind of thought of it in my head, I don't know how accurate this is, but it's almost like you start out third person and you gradually transition into knowing the character's thoughts without like realizing when you switched. Like that's kind of how it felt to me. So I don't know if that's not like a technical definition, but like I could always pinpoint when I felt like that, even if I couldn't like explain, like here is the sentence, and like this is where it happened. But
it's rarely like, and he thought this.
Right.
It just goes straight into the thought, but the thought is like a statement.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yes,
like like a lot of books aren't written like that, because if they're having like internal monologue, it's usually like they do next paragraph, and it's kind of like italicized, whenever like a character is like actually thinking something. But like, it just kind of just goes right in. It's like almost the same sentence, kind of. It doesn't do like a paragraph break or anything like that.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. And oh, sorry, go ahead, Taylor.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, what you're probably about to discuss is like, I can't help linking that with how good Austen is at characters and getting us like immediately invested in characters, is because she kind of like sneaks you into their head without you noticing it. Like I really love, like I prefer third person anyway. I prefer to read third person over first person. And so I really like that she kind of like, we get the best of both, because she does still give us all of those like inner workings of the characters without having to do like first person. It's like, I always come away from her books feeling like I know all of these characters so well, and like they're such full and complete people, and that's just like very impressive to me. So sorry, go ahead, Taylor.
Oh, you said it perfectly. But I will say, like, this is probably where she perfected it. It's just done so seamlessly, and it feels so much like the book is solely from Anne's perspective, even though that's not always the case.
Right.
Like, I think there's maybe at least one instance where we are not where Anne is not actually in the scene. And I'm pretty sure when Wentworth is talking to Admiral Croft and Mrs. Croft about wanting to find a wife. I'm pretty sure Anne wasn't in that scene.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And then in the beginning, when it's just basically her father.
Yes, exactly.
And like with the thoughts just all out in the open like that, it's just like that's why you feel like you know these characters so well, just because their whole souls and minds are just out open for you, you know, to read about, and it's nothing's closed off kind of thing, you know, and it's just it's really out there. And
and it almost feels more natural to me than first person would, because I don't know how to explain this. It almost feels like how you would normally understand somebody's motivations, because you just get little bits throughout, and it's not like when you're talking to someone, it's not like they'll like introduce themselves with like, I'm hoping that man takes me back after he dumped me like 7 years ago, you know. So I almost feel like this style feels a little more conversational, I guess, is what I'm getting at. I don't know. I feel like I explained that very badly.
No, I thought you did a good job. Like, I get what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it does feel like you're being brought into like what's happening and what Anne is thinking.
Exactly.
Yeah. Was there anything else that we wanted to discuss, or are we ready to go into favorite quotes?
I'm ready for the quotes.
I'm ready for the quotes.
Yeah. If you have a favorite quote to share, please do. If you don't have a quote you'd like to share, that's also fine.
Don't mind me as I read the entire letter over here. No, I'm just kidding.
I know. we just have like an invited reading of this letter.
Right.
I do have mine ready.
I have mine highlighted, but I need to find it.
Okay.
I got mine.
Can definitely go first.
Go ahead, Cara.
Okay. So mine, and I have like many lines that I marked, but it's from that conversation between Anne and Captain Harville. And I feel like this really goes along with what we were talking about like the blatant feminist overtones throughout this book. She says, yes, if you please, no references to examples in books. Men have had every advantage of us in telling their own story. Education has been theirs in so much higher a degree. The pen has been in their hands. I will not allow books to prove anything.
Yes.
Like, I love that line, like, especially the men have had every advantage of us in telling their own story. Because, like, that is still something that we talk about. And, like, I just love that Anne comes right out and she's like, no, I'm not going to give you this one. No. I just, like, I really love, there's a lot of parts of that conversation I love. Like, I almost, I actually got, like, super choked up when Captain Harville was describing, like when he says goodbye to his wife and children, and it's like he's talking himself into thinking he won't see them, and then they show up like earlier than they think. I was like, that's really sweet. But yeah, I love that part with Anne, just like, it shows like what we were talking about, where it's not like women weren't aware that men were the ones telling stories, like, so.
Right.
It's a good one. Would either of you like to share a quote, or?
Yeah, I got mine. It says, there could have been no two hearts so open, no tastes so similar, no feelings so in unison, no countenances so beloved. Now they were strangers. And that, like, that first part is just so beautiful in how they were together. And then it's just like, it just hits you with the reality that Anne just doesn't think that they can be together now. And it's just, now they were strangers. And I'm like, oh, that hurts so much. I love that quote so much. It's just so beautiful of how like they were and so eager for the future they were. And then it's just, you know, it was just over, and now they had that, and now she feels like it's just like they're almost like, she was saying like they were worse than strangers. They could have never become acquainted. It was a perpetual estrangement. I'm just like, oh man.
Yeah. It's a good one too.
Yeah, I love it.
My quote will just be the entire book.
I know. It's like, so read Persuasion if you want to know.
Yeah. Tati, would you like to share a quote?
I don't actually have one. I listened to the book as an audiobook.
Yeah.
So I didn't write down any quotes. But Cara's quote, the one she mentioned, is definitely my favorite. I remember when I was listening to it, I just stopped moving and I listened to it.
Yeah. It's so good. So I have mine. It's not long, but it is kind of. So it's talking about when Anne and Wentworth first met. He was at the time a remarkably fine young man, with a great deal of intelligence, spirit, and brilliancy, and Anne was an extremely pretty girl, with gentleness, modesty, taste, and feeling. Half the sum of attraction on either side might have been enough, for he had nothing to do, and she had hardly anybody to love. But the encounter of such lavish recommendations could not fail. They were gradually acquainted, and when acquainted, rapidly and deeply in love. It would be difficult to say which had seen the highest perfection in the other, or which had been the happiest, she in receiving his declarations and proposals, or he in having them accepted. And it's just like a really bittersweet introduction to their relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I just really like how like hard it was for, or like it would be difficult to see which had seen the highest perfection in the other. Like,
yes,
so cute.
I know.
Yeah,
I love that.
yeah. And like it's true at the end too. Is like they both think they're like so lucky for having the other person, and I just love
that. So yeah, this is now a Persuasion Stan channel. Everything is like a Persuasion fan cam.
Yeah. Only Persuasion content from here on out.
No other suggestions, please.
I will read no other book or talk about any other book. Does anyone have any other comments on the book, or are we good to wrap up?
I think, yeah, that's
cool. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in, not just to this one, but to the Austen Anon live shows and all of our books, like read-alongs as well. This was so much fun to do. And thank you, Tati and Nicole from Who Picked This Book. If you want to follow them and Cara, all of the links are down below. I also included 2 other links, one to the Justice for Breonna Taylor petition and one for supporting Black trans homeless people. So there's a donation link and a petition link down in the description below. Thank you so much for joining Austen Anon. Cara, would you also like to add some words about Austen Anon as a whole? Not to put you on the spot, but I felt that's closing down the entire read along without even talking.
Yeah, I don't know how it snuck up on me when like we've literally been planning this month by month, but yeah, I think Taylor pretty much said it all. Thank you guys for joining us. This has been honestly a dream come true to get to just gush about Jane Austen with people. Like, if my younger self could see me now, like, yeah, this has just been like such a wonderful experience, and thank you guys for helping to contribute to that. We have loved having you like read along with us and comment, and just it's like I feel like we're just this book club of Austen lovers, and what more could you want from life, you know? So thank you guys so much for helping make this the absolute joy that it was.
Yes. And also thank you super much to Hannah from Lynn Hermione for running the Instagram. You are amazing.
Yes.
You've done an excellent job with the Bookstagram, so thank you so much.
Yes.
And thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in and reading with us. Have a good afternoon or evening, wherever you are.
Yeah.